The ladle hung in midair as the explosion tore through the afternoon. Staff Sergeant Noel Simmons had been scooping potatoes onto a young soldier's plate, dressed in a standard kitchen apron that hid the sealed trident pinned to her chest. The blast rattled the building, scattered meal trays across tables, and turned an ordinary Tuesday lunch into the moment everyone learned the truth. The quiet woman dishing out food wasn't kitchen staff at all. The impact cut the power, set off sirens, and sent 200 personnel scrambling for safety in a dining hall that had become a war zone. Simmons didn't scramble for safety. She tossed the ladle aside, ripped away her apron, and reached for the HK-416 rifle hidden under the counter. Navy SEALs on secret missions don't stop being warriors just because they're dressed as food workers. The insurgents attacking the base had no idea what they were walking into. Most of the people on base were about to find out that the cheerful woman serving their meals was actually a highly trained combat expert. She'd been running surveillance while pretending to pour coffee and serve breakfast. Her SEAL badge caught the emergency lights as she raised her weapon into firing position. Suddenly, everyone in that dining hall realized lunch service was about to turn into a demonstration of what happens when you attack a SEAL's position. The attackers had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were hitting a basic supply base with light security. They were about to discover that light security looks different when a SEAL operator is working undercover in the kitchen. Attacking during lunch meant they'd positioned themselves between Noel Simmons and the door, which would be their final error. The mission had begun 3 weeks earlier with a secret briefing that would sound ridiculous to anyone outside Special Forces. Naval Command had received intelligence about someone on the inside at Forward Operating Base Viper. Someone was leaking mission details to enemy networks, and standard security checks had failed to find the source. Commander Sarah Chen had explained the plan with the calm voice of someone who'd spent years organizing difficult operations. "We need somebody who can watch everyone on base, who has reason to be in common areas, who can talk to everyone from junior soldiers to senior officers without drawing attention." Simmons had reviewed the base layout, the staff list, the patterns of leaked information. Kitchen workers see everyone several times daily in relaxed settings when people speak freely. "Exactly right. Can you handle cooking? I can heat rations and make coffee. That's probably good enough for military kitchens." Chen had grinned. "You'll need better skills than that. 2 weeks of intensive training in military food prep, then placement as temporary help. Your backstory is you're filling vacant positions while regular workers are on leave. You stay in place until you find the leak or prove the intelligence wrong." So Staff Sergeant Noel Simmons, combat veteran of 6 deployments, 73 confirmed kills of priority targets, expert in close combat and tactical operations, spent 2 weeks learning industrial kitchen equipment, memorizing recipes for feeding 200 people, and practicing the friendly conversation kitchen workers make while serving meals. The placement went smoothly. She arrived with proper orders, valid credentials, and a background story that checked out under casual review. For 3 weeks she served breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, and dinner at 6 in the evening. She heard soldiers grumble about their commanders, officers complain about mission rules, and everyone complain about the food she was serving. She also spotted patterns, certain people asking pointed questions, information being discussed that should have been secret, a supply sergeant unusually interested in convoy schedules, a translator present for too many classified meetings. She was 3 days away from finishing her investigation and writing her report when the mortars began falling. The first round struck the base's east side, a test shot to establish aim. The second landed closer, hitting near the vehicle area. Simmons recognized the pattern instantly. Strategic targeting, walking fire toward the center. The third round hit the dining hall's east wall. The detonation was enormous, close enough to shatter windows, send metal fragments through the eating area, and injure at least a dozen people near that wall. The lights died, backup systems kicked in, and panic spread as 200 people tried to understand what was happening. Simmons figured it out in 3 seconds. Mortar bombardment, likely a distraction. Ground troops would come next. The dining hall was about to become either a defended stronghold or a killing field, depending on what happened in the next minute. She grabbed her HK-416 from under the serving counter, the weapon she'd kept there for precisely this situation, disassembled and wrapped in plastic to avoid questions about why kitchen equipment included a SEAL team rifle. Her hands moved through reassembly with practiced ease developed through countless repetitions. Magazine in, bolt pulled, safety checked, sights confirmed, 4 seconds to battle ready. The young soldier she'd been serving, a kid from Idaho who'd thanked her for extra helpings, was on the ground bleeding from shrapnel. Simmons grabbed him, pulled him behind the counter where the steel equipment offered protection. "Stay low, put pressure on that wound. You're going to survive this." She moved through the hall with authority, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Everyone get down, away from windows. Wounded people to the middle. Anyone who can fight, set up positions around the edge. A captain she'd served daily for 3 weeks stared at her, confused. Who are you to be giving orders? Simmons reached for her chest, tore open her uniform shirt, showed the SEAL badge she'd kept hidden under the apron. Staff Sergeant Simmons, Naval Special Warfare. I'm the senior special operations person on this base. Right now I'm taking command of this position. Organize your people, or stay out of my way. The captain's confusion turned to understanding, then immediate action. You heard her, move wounded to the center. Everyone else, take cover and get ready to defend. More mortars were dropping now. Steady bombardment meant to weaken the base before the ground attack. Simmons moved to the west wall, looked through a broken window at the area outside. Movement 300 meters out. At least 40 fighters advancing in organized formation. 2 coordinated, 2 well-armed for random insurgents. This was a planned strike with clear goals. She grabbed the radio she'd hidden in her gear. Viper base. Viper base. This is Shadow 7. Base under coordinated mortar and ground attack. Estimate 40 hostiles moving in from west side. Need immediate backup and air support. The reply came through interference. Shadow 7, Viper base. Backup is 20 minutes away. Air support 30 minutes. Can you hold? Simmons looked at her situation. 200 people in the dining hall, mostly support staff with minimal combat experience, maybe 30 with real weapons. Unknown wounded against 40 trained fighters with heavy weapons and mortar support. Viper base, will hold. Shadow 7 out. She turned to face the hall full of soldiers staring at her with confusion, fear and growing awareness. These people had worked beside her for 3 weeks. Now they were about to see what she really did for a living. Listen carefully. I'm a Navy SEAL running secret operations on this base. The enemy is about to attack with superior numbers. We have 20 minutes until help arrives, which means we hold this spot for 20 minutes. Here's our plan. She pointed to a sergeant she knew from the motor pool. Take 10 people with rifles. Set up firing spots on the west wall. Don't shoot until I say so. Make every bullet matter. She pointed to the captain. You organize the wounded. Set up medical treatment in the kitchen where there's better cover. Anyone who can't fight helps with injuries. She pointed to a corporal from communication. Find me every weapon in this building. Rifles, pistols, kitchen knives if that's what we have. Give them to anyone who can use them. She watched her orders being carried out, saw chaos organizing into purposeful movement. These weren't elite fighters, but they were soldiers, and soldiers could fight when someone gave them clear direction and belief. The enemy was 200 meters out now. Simmons could see them clearly through her rifle's scope. Organized into 3 attack groups, covering each other's advance, using obstacles well. Trained fighters who knew their business. She selected her first target, a fighter who seemed to be leading others, carrying a radio, positioned to coordinate the assault. 700 meters per second bullet speed, 150 meter range, light wind, no adjustment needed. She fired. The fighter fell. His radio went silent mid-broadcast. The effect on the enemy formation was immediate. Confusion, hesitation. Fighters diving for cover as they realized someone was engaging them with accurate fire. Simmons switched targets. Second fighter trying to set up a machine gun. 2 quick shots. Center mass. The machine gun went silent before firing a single round. Third fighter trying to rally others. Headshot. The rally collapsed. West wall. Fire at targets you can hit. Keep their heads down. Gunfire erupted from the hall's western positions. Not the precision Simmons was delivering, but enough volume to make the enemy think twice about advance. The attackers hit the ground, started returning fire, and the battle changed from an attack to a firefight, which gave Simmons exactly what she needed: time. She moved through the dining hall, directing fire, repositioning defenders, making sure wounded were getting care. Her HK-466 fired in controlled bursts whenever targets appeared. A fighter exposing himself to move forward, another trying to circle around, a third attempting to use a rocket launch. The enemy was learning that attacking a supply base was different when that base included a SEAL operator who'd been ready for this exact scenario since arriving disguised as kitchen help. A huge explosion rocked the north wall. Rocket impact that blew a hole through the structure and sent defenders scrambling. Enemy fighters immediately tried to use the breach, rushing toward the opening. Simmons was already moving. She reached the opening in 6 seconds, positioned herself to cover it, and fired as the first fighter tried to enter. The HK-416 was German engineering at its finest, dependable, accurate, deadly in trained hands. Simmons's hands were extremely trained. The first fighter dropped. The second fell trying to get through. The third died before crossing the threshold. I need 3 rifles on this opening now. Soldiers responded, setting up a firing position that turned the hole in the wall into a death trap, rather than an entry point. The enemy's attempt to exploit failed. Cost them 5 fighters and made them rethink their plan, but they weren't quitting. Simmons could see them regrouping, preparing for another push. They had numbers, they had heavy weapons, and they clearly had a specific mission. This wasn't random violence but a calculated operation. A young specialist appeared beside her, someone she recognized from serving him eggs each morning. "Ma'am, we've got movement on the east wall. Looks like they're trying to circle around." Simmons sprinted to the eastern side, confirmed the flanking movement. 10 to 15 fighters using the mortar damage as cover for an approach from an unexpected angle. "Get me 5 rifles on the east wall. They're trying to flank us." She took position, began engaging the flanking group. Her HK-416 had started with a 30-round magazine. She'd burned through 2 magazines engaging the western attack, was on her third dealing with the eastern flankers. But those weren't random shots. They were precise eliminations of specific dangers. A fighter with a radio coordinating movement, another with a rocket launcher that could devastate the hall's defenses, a third who appeared to be an experienced leader directing younger fighters. The flanking attempt stumbled, broke apart, pulled back to regroup. "Ma'am," the communications corporal was running toward her. "Backup reports 15 minutes out. Can we last that long?" Simmons assessed the situation. Ammunition running low. Wounded needing evacuation. The enemy had probably committed most of their force, meaning the next attack would be their maximum effort. "We'll last. We don't have a choice." The next assault came from 2 directions at once. Western wall and the northern opening, coordinated to split the defenders' attention and create openings to exploit. The enemy had learned from earlier attempts, was now using better tactics. Simmons had to decide, split her focus covering both positions or concentrate on the bigger threat. She chose the opening. If it was breached, the fight would turn into close combat inside the hall where the defenders would lose their edge. Western wall, pour fire into that attack. Keep them pinned down. She positioned herself at the northern opening, her HK-416 covering the approach. The enemy came at the gap with covering fire and momentum, trying to overwhelm the position through sheer aggression. Simmons met aggression with accuracy. First fighter through the opening. 2 quick shots. Second fighter. Headshot. Third, center mass. They kept coming, kept dying, and the opening became a bottleneck where tactical aggression met professional shooting and lost every exchange. Her HK-416s went empty. She dropped the magazine, loaded her last 30 rounds, kept firing. 29 rounds left. 28. 27. "I need ammunition at the opening now." A corporal slid magazines across the floor. 5.56mm rounds taken from M4 carbines that worked with her HK-416. Not her preferred ammunition, but ammunition nonetheless. She reloaded. Kept fighting. Behind her she could hear soldiers following her lead. The motor pool sergeant was directing fire on the western wall with surprising skill. The captain had organized medical care and was treating wounded while also coordinating defensive position. The young specialist who'd warned her about the flanking movement was now covering the eastern approach with steady rifle fire that kept enemy fighters pinned. These weren't special operations fighters, but they were becoming something more than support staff. They were soldiers defending their ground, and under Simmons's command, they were discovering abilities they hadn't known they had. A massive explosion shook the southern wall, a section of the hall that had been relatively calm until now. Simmons turned, saw a new threat developing. A technical vehicle, a pickup with a heavy machine gun mounted in back, was moving toward the compound. Its crew-served weapon able to tear apart the hall's defenses if it got a good firing angle. "I've got the truck," Simmons shouted, running toward the southern wall. She reached a firing position, assessed the moving target. The technical was 200 meters out, traveling at roughly 40 kilometers per hour. Driver and gunner visible in her scope. She led the target, adjusted for movement and distance, and fired a burst at the driver's position. The technical swerved violently as the driver was hit, went off course, crashed into a concrete barrier. The gunner tried to aim the heavy machine gun, but Simmons was already adjusting. 3 rounds, center mass. The gunner collapsed over his weapon. The technical was stopped, but its appearance showed the enemy was committing backup forces. They were desperate now, throwing everything at the compound in one last attempt to achieve their goal before reinforcements showed up. Shadow 7, Viper. Backup 10 minutes out. Give me your status. Viper. We're still holding, but ammunition is critical. Enemy is committing reserves. We need you here fast. Copy, Shadow 7. Coming in hot. Mark your position. Simmons grabbed a smoke grenade, marking position with purple smoke. She threw the canister through the broken southern wall. Purple smoke billowed into the afternoon sky, creating a clear visual signal for incoming friendly forces. The enemy saw the smoke too, understood what it meant, made their final desperate push. A coordinated assault from 3 directions at once. Every remaining fighter committed to breaching the hull before backup arrived. Simmons made a split-second tactical choice. The northern opening was still the critical point. If it fell, everything fell. She ran back to that position, shouting orders as she moved. Western wall, keep firing. Eastern wall, watch for flankers. Southern position, cover my back. Everyone else, pass ammunition forward and keep fighting. She reached the northern opening just as the main enemy assault hit. 15 to 20 fighters rushing the gap with covering fire and raw aggression, determined to overwhelm through numbers and force. Simmons's HK-416 spoke with controlled intensity. She wasn't just shooting. She was managing the opening, eliminating threats by priority. The fighter with the rocket launcher went down first. The one carrying what looked like explosives died second. The leader directing the assault fell third. But they kept coming. For every fighter she dropped, another appeared. Her magazine went empty. She reloaded without looking, muscle memory taking over, her eyes never leaving the opening. The corporal who'd been supplying ammunition appeared beside her with an M4 carbine, adding his fire to hers. "Ma'am, I'm staying here. You taught us to fight. I'm fighting." More soldiers appeared. The young specialist from communications, a private from the maintenance section, a sergeant from administration, who'd probably never fired his weapon outside of training ranges. All of them taking positions around the opening. All of them adding their fire to the defense. The opening had become a wall of American firepower. Every enemy fighter who tried to enter met a storm of accurately aimed rounds from multiple defenders. Simmons coordinated their fire, calling out targets, ensuring overlapping fields of fire, transforming individual shooters into a coordinated defensive team. Left side, fighter with grenades. Take him down. Right side, 2 coming together. Engage both. Center, watch for the one in black. He's carrying explosives. Her commands were sharp, immediate, informed by years of combat experience that could read a situation and identify threats before they materialized. The soldiers around her responded with growing confidence, their shooting improving under her direction, their fear transforming into focused aggression. A fighter made it within 5 meters of the opening, closer than anyone had got. He was fast, experienced, using covering fire from his team to close the distance. Simmons engaged him with a burst, but he dove behind debris just outside the gap. She could see him preparing to throw something, grenade or explosive device. Grenade threat at the opening. Everyone down. She didn't go down. Instead, she stepped directly into the gap, exposed herself completely, and put 3 rounds into the fighter before he could complete the throw. The explosive fell from his hands, detonated among his own fighters, and the blast wave threw Simmons backward into the hall. She hit the floor hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. The specialist was immediately there, pulling her back from the opening, checking for injuries. "Ma'am, are you hit?" Simmons shook her head, clearing the concussion effects, checking for damage. Nothing broken, minor cuts from debris. Still combat effective. She grabbed her HK-416, got back to her feet. "I'm fine, back on the opening. They'll try to exploit the confusion." But the explosion had devastated the enemy assault group. Bodies littered the approach to the opening. The survivors were pulling back, their momentum broken, their losses mounting beyond acceptable levels. The enemy assault broke against that determined resistance. Too many casualties, too little progress. Too many Americans refusing to surrender. The fighters pulled back, regrouped, and in that moment of relief, Simmons heard the most beautiful sound of her military career, the distinctive rotor beat of Black Hawk helicopters inbound at speed. "Backup is here. Keep fighting. We're about to get reinforcement." The helicopters came in fast and aggressive. Door gunners opened fire on the retreating enemy positions. 7.62mm machine guns raking the assault formations with devastating precision. Simmons could see the impacts. Enemy fighters being cut down as they tried to retreat. Vehicles being disabled. Heavy weapons being destroyed. The enemy formation fell apart under that punishing fire. Fighters scattering in all directions. The organized assault collapsing into individual survival attempts. Some threw down their weapons and ran. Others tried to keep fighting and were eliminated by the helicopter door gunners, who had superior angles and unlimited ammunition. Ground vehicles followed. Humvees and armored trucks loaded with infantry who jumped out and established a perimeter, their fresh troops and full ammunition loads shifting the tactical balance decisively. The backup infantry moved through the compound with professional efficiency, clearing sectors, securing positions, pursuing fleeing enemy fighters. The backup commander, a Major Simmons recognized from morning briefings where she'd served coffee, appeared at the hall entrance with a squad of infantry providing security. Shadow 7, Staff Sergeant Simmons. Here, Simmons slung her HK-416, moved to meet him, her uniform covered in dust and debris, her face showing the strain of 37 minutes of continuous combat. The major stared at her, recognition dawning. "You're the kitchen worker. You've been serving me breakfast for 3 weeks." "Yes, sir." Also conducting classified counterintelligence operations. And as of 30 minutes ago, commanding the defense of this position against a coordinated enemy assault. The major looked past her at the defended hall, wounded being treated, soldiers manning defensive position, spent brass covering the floor like carpet, enemy dead visible through openings in the walls, the smell of gunpowder and blood mixing with spilled food from lunch service. The northern opening showed evidence of fierce fighting, bullet impacts, explosion damage, debris and blood marking where the most desperate combat had occurred. How many enemy casualties? Approximately 40 killed. Unknown number wounded. We held the position against overwhelming numbers through superior tactics and soldiers who refused to quit. And your casualties? 14 wounded, 3 critical, 0 killed. Every soldier who was alive when this started is still alive. The major's expression shifted from disbelief to professional respect. Staff Sergeant, that's extraordinary. Against those odds with this force composition, that shouldn't have been possible. It was possible because these soldiers fought like warriors when someone gave them leadership and confidence. They deserve the credit, sir. I just provided direction. The backup secured the compound, pursued retreating enemy forces, and established a defensive perimeter that pushed out 500 meters from the hall. Medical evacuation helicopters arrived for the wounded, both American and enemy fighters who'd survived their injury. The hall, bullet-scarred, partially destroyed, filled with evidence of desperate combat, became a scene of controlled chaos as reinforcements took over the security posture. Simmons finally allowed herself to lower her HK-416, to breathe normally, to process what had just happened. 37 minutes from first mortar impact to backup arrival. 37 minutes of continuous combat command and precision shooting. 37 minutes that had transformed kitchen staff into combat veterans and turned a potential massacre into a successful defensive action. The young private from Idaho, the one she'd served extra potatoes, the one she'd dragged to cover and treated when the first mortar hit, approached her with his arm in a sling, bandages on his face, and gratitude in his eyes. "Ma'am, I need to thank you for the medical treatment, for the leadership, for everything. You saved all our lives today." Simmons looked at him, at the other soldiers gathering around her, at the hall full of people who'd discovered that their kitchen staff included a Navy SEAL who'd been protecting them in ways they'd never known. "We saved our lives. You fought. You held positions. You followed orders under fire. That's what made the defense succeed." The motor pool sergeant stepped forward. "Ma'am, with respect, we wouldn't have known what to do without you. You turned panic into defense. You gave us purpose and direction when we were about to die. That's leadership." Simmons wanted to deflect, to minimize, to redirect credit away from herself, but looking at these soldiers' faces, she understood they needed this acknowledgement, needed to recognize what had happened and who had led them through it. "Then let's acknowledge all of it." She said. "Yes, I commanded the defense. Yes, I engaged priority targets, but you executed orders under fire. You supplied ammunition while rounds were impacting around you. You treated wounded while the battle was still raging. You held positions that professional soldiers would struggle to maintain. We survived because everyone did their job. That's what matters." The base commander arrived, the colonel who'd been furious about undisclosed operations on his base. His expression now mixed anger with grudging respect as he surveyed the defended position and the soldiers who'd held it. "Staff Sergeant Simmons, we need to talk about many things." "Yes, sir. I'm prepared to provide full accountability for my actions and the operation that brought me to this base." The colonel looked at the hall full of soldiers who were alive because of her leadership, at the enemy dead being processed outside the compound, at the defensive positions that had held against overwhelming odds. "We'll get to that. But first, good work, Staff Sergeant.
Outstanding work. The after-action report took 3 days to compile. Simmons had eliminated 14 enemy fighters personally with her HK-416, coordinated the defense that killed 23 more through organized fire from Hull personnel, and held a position that conventional wisdom said should have been overrun in the first 5 minutes of assault. The Hull soldiers, people who thought she was just kitchen staff serving them food, gave statements describing how a SEAL operator had transformed chaos into organized defense, how precision shooting and tactical leadership had turned a massacre into a successful defensive action. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, the supply sergeant who'd been compromising operations, was in military custody, facing charges that would result in life imprisonment. The evidence Simmons had collected during her 3-week assignment was thorough enough that his defense attorney had already advised him to plead guilty in exchange for any consideration available. Naval Special Warfare Command sent Commander Sarah Chen to conduct the classified debrief.
They met in a secured room where Simmons could provide the full mission report without the compartmentalization that had governed the operation. You were supposed to identify the leak, document evidence, and extract quietly, Chen said. Instead, you commanded a defensive action against a large enemy force using a hall full of support personnel as your tactical element. The situation developed in ways I couldn't control, ma'am. When the attack came, I had 2 choices: maintain my cover and watch 200 soldiers get massacred, or reveal my identity and defend the position. I chose to defend. With an HK-4116 you'd kept hidden under the serving counter for 3 weeks. I'm a SEAL, ma'am. I don't go anywhere unarmed. The rifle was disassembled and concealed as kitchen equipment. It passed every inspection because no one was looking for a special operations weapon system in the kitchen. Chen smiled slightly. The base commander is furious that we ran an operation on his base without his knowledge. But he's alive to be furious along with everyone else who was in that hall. That's what matters. Naval Special Warfare agrees. You're being awarded the Silver Star for your actions during the defense. The citation will be classified because the operation itself remains classified, but the recognition goes in your record. And the counterintelligence mission, successful. You identified the leak, documented his activities, secured evidence that will result in conviction, and prevented further compromise of operation. The fact that you also defended a compound under assault while maintaining your cover until the tactical situation required revealing it is considered exemplary performance under impossible circumstances. Simmons nodded. What's next for me, ma'am? You return to your team. No more kitchen assignments unless you specifically request them. Though I suspect you're done serving food for a while. I don't know, ma'am. It was actually kind of peaceful until the mortar started. Chen laughed. Staff Sergeant, you're a SEAL operator. Peace isn't really our specialty. 6 months later, Simmons was back with her SEAL team, conducting direct action missions that didn't involve serving food or pretending to be support personnel. But the story of the hall defense had spread through naval special warfare. The operator who'd been disguised as kitchen staff and had commanded a successful defense using whatever forces were available. The soldiers who'd fought beside her that day. The private from Idaho she'd served extra potatoes. The captain who'd initially questioned her authority. The corporal who'd gathered ammunition while under fire. All of them carried the knowledge that the quiet woman who'd served their meals had been a Navy SEAL protecting them in ways they'd never known until violence forced her to reveal her true purpose. The young private recovered from his shrapnel wounds wrote her a letter that arrived through official channels. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for saving my life twice that day. Once when you pulled me to cover and treated my wounds, and once when you defended the position while I was too wounded to fight. I also wanted to apologize for every time I complained about the food you served. I understand now that feeding us wasn't your real job, but you did it anyway, while also protecting us from threats we didn't know existed. That's what makes you a hero, not the fighting, but the fact that you did the job no one knew needed doing until the day it mattered most. Thank you for serving us in every way that word means. Simmons kept the letter, not because she needed validation or recognition, but because it reminded her why the mission had mattered. Counterintelligence work wasn't glamour. It was serving food and listening to conversations and documenting evidence while pretending to be someone else. But when that unglamorous work prevented soldiers from dying in ambushes, set up with compromised intelligence, it mattered as much as any direct action mission. The SEAL Trident on her chest had been hidden beneath kitchen aprons for 3 weeks. But it had always been there, representing what she was regardless of whatever cover she wore or role she played. The enemy had learned that lesson the hard way when they attacked during lunch service and discovered that kitchen staff included a SEAL operator who'd been prepared for exactly that possibility. Years later, when Simmons had retired from active duty and was teaching tactics to new SEAL candidates,
She used the hall defense as a case study in adaptive leadership and making decisions under impossible circumstances. You won't always have perfect tactical situations, she'd tell them. Sometimes you'll be outnumbered, under-equipped and defending positions with personnel who aren't special operations qualified. Your job isn't to surrender to those limitations, it's to work within them and find ways to succeed anyway. The hall defense succeeded because I used the assets available. I didn't have a SEAL team, I had support soldiers with basic rifle training. I didn't have optimal weapons, I had gathered ammunition and whatever rifles were available. I didn't have prepared defensive positions. I had a building with broken walls and emergency lighting, but I had soldiers who were willing to fight if someone gave them direction and confidence. I had sufficient weapons to engage threats. I had defensive positions that could be improved through tactical positioning, and I had 20 minutes to hold until reinforcements arrived. So that's what we did. We held for 20 minutes, and everyone who was willing to fight lived to tell about it. One of the candidates asked the question Simmons had been expecting. "Ma'am, what was it like to reveal your identity after hiding it for 3 weeks? Didn't that compromise the operation?" It did compromise the counterintelligence mission, but that mission's purpose was protecting those soldiers from threats enabled by compromised intelligence. When a direct threat materialized, continuing to hide my identity would have meant failing the mission's actual purpose, keeping those people alive. So I made the call that saving lives was more important than maintaining operational security. Naval Special Warfare agreed with that assessment, but I won't pretend the decision was easy. Every time you break cover, you're ending an operation that took weeks or months to establish. You make that trade when the situation requires it, not casual. Another candidate asked, "The report says you eliminated 14 enemy fighters personally. How did you maintain fire discipline while also commanding the defense?" By understanding that precision shooting and tactical command served the same purpose, controlling the battlefield. When I was shooting, I was eliminating specific threats that could devastate our defensive positions. When I was commanding, I was positioning forces to maximize their effectiveness. Both activities contributed to the same goal. The key is knowing when to do which. If there's a critical threat that only you can eliminate, shoot. If there's a defensive position that needs to be organized, command. If you try to do both simultaneously, you'll do neither well. Prioritize what the situation requires in that moment. The students nodded, taking notes, trying to understand how someone could serve food for 3 weeks and then command a defensive action, using hall personnel as tactical elements, trying to grasp the mindset that made those seemingly contradictory activities part of the same mission. Simmons understood their confusion. Most people saw operators as door kickers and direct action specialists. They didn't understand that sometimes the most important operations involved serving scrambled eggs while listening to conversation, building a case against an insider threat while pretending to scoop potatoes, until the day violence forced the operator to step forward and demonstrate that the SEAL Trident, hidden beneath a kitchen apron, was always there, always ready, always representing capabilities that would emerge when circumstances required. The hall had been repaired, the dead buried, the wounded recovered, but the memory of that day remained. The moment when kitchen staff revealed themselves to be special operations warriors, when food service became fire superiority, when the woman serving lunch demonstrated what SEALs do when someone attacks their position. Staff Sergeant Noel Simmons, the operator who served food until the enemy attacked and everyone saw her SEAL Trident. The warrior who proved that sometimes the most lethal person in the compound is the one serving you mashed potatoes and listening to everything you say. She'd been just serving food in the hall until the enemy hit the compound, and then she'd been exactly what her SEAL Trident indicated, a naval special warfare operator, who'd been prepared for violence from the moment she'd arrived, disguised as support staff. The enemy learned the hard way, the permanent way, because SEALs don't stop being SEALs just because they're wearing aprons and serving food. They just wait for the moment when the apron comes off, the rifle comes out, and everyone discovers what was always there beneath the disguise, every single time. The legend of the hall defense became required reading at the Naval Special Warfare Center, not because of the combat statistics, though 14 enemy killed and 0 friendly deaths spoke volumes, but because of what it represented about adaptability and mission execution under impossible constraints. Simmons had been given an assignment that required her to be invisible, to blend in, to observe without being observed. For 3 weeks, she'd succeeded perfectly, gathering intelligence while serving breakfast, lunch and dinner to 200 oblivious soldiers. Then circumstances changed. The mission parameters shifted from intelligence gathering to force protection in the span of 3 seconds between mortar impacts, and Simmons had adapted immediately, transitioning from invisible observer to visible commander without hesitation. That adaptability, that ability to recognize when the mission had changed and to execute the new mission with the same professionalism as the original, defined what made Special Operations warriors different from conventional soldier. The HK-4116 that had been hidden beneath the serving counter for 3 weeks hadn't changed. Simmons's capabilities hadn't changed. Her training, her experience, her commitment to protecting American lives, none of that had changed. What changed was visibility. The SEAL Trident that had been hidden became visible. The operator who'd been disguised revealed herself. The warrior who'd been serving food started eliminating threats. And 37 minutes later, when the backup arrived and the battle was won, everyone understood what had always been true. The most dangerous person in the compound had been the one serving mashed potatoes and listening to everything you said. Staff Sergeant Noel Simmons, the Hull SEAL, the invisible warrior who became visible exactly when it mattered most. The enemy never saw her coming. That was the point. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of brave women in uniform.